Okay, so today we're going to be reviewing lesson 7.4, solving in big time style using two-step equations. So let's look at our learning goals for today. Our learning goals are to write two-step equations, solve two-step equations, and verify solutions within a problem context. Okay, so we'll be covering all of those today. So let's look at the problem that they give us in the beginning, our little hook. So have you ever heard of the term business plan? A business plan is a way for a company or business owner to conduct research on competition, determine costs for running the business, and set financial goals in terms of profits for the company. Many times, businesses will create 1 to 3 or 5-year business plans. Why do you think businesses would create multiple business plans? Write some of your ideas down on the bottom of that page. Why do you think businesses would want to create a 1, a 3, or a 5-year business plan? Alright, now go ahead and flip to the next. Okay, so it says for problem 1, learning the business. Katie is starting her own limousine rental company. She wisely decides to check her competitors' pricing plans before setting her own plan. The table shows the fees from 2 rival limousine rental companies. So look at the table. Notice your independent and your dependent variables. We have the numbers of hours rented, which is our independent variable, and then our other variables. So our limousines by Lily in dollars, that's your cost for rent there. And then transportation with class, and that's also measured in dollars as well. So compare those prices. Does one look better than the other? And for what times, how many hours rented, does which one look the best? All right, so looking at number 1, it says use the table to answer each question. So what difference in price to rent a limousine from Limousine by Lily for 2 hours compared to 1 hour? So think, how would you do that? And also, look, these little guys with the thought bubbles are always giving you hints. So let's read what he says. So a 2-hour rental is about $125, and a 1-hour rental is about $100. The difference will be about $25. So we can even just estimate there. So we know that's about $100, and that's about $125. But if we're finding the difference, obviously that means we're going to subtract. So you would just subtract those two. 123, 74, and this is being a little crazy, minus 99.99, which should give you, and that does look really messed up. All right, so our answer would be $23.75. So then looking at B, what's the difference in price to rent a limousine from Limousine by Lily for 3 hours compared to 2 hours? So now we're comparing between 3 hours and 2 hours. So you're going to do the same procedures there. So pause the video and see what your answer would be. Okay, so hopefully you checked your answer and you got $23.75 again. So part C says, what's the difference in price to rent a limousine from Limousines by Lily for 4 hours compared to 3? So again, we want to do the same exact procedure with our two numbers. So here we have 4 and there we have 3. Pause the video and then check your answer with mine. So hopefully you got the same answer. Again, the difference between the two prices was $23.75. Go ahead and look at the next page and we'll work on that. Okay, so look at part D. Read the question and figure out what pieces from the table you'll need to use. Remember, they're asking for the difference, so that means that you're going to subtract. Pause the video and check your answer. Okay. So again, we should have gotten $23.75. So So looking at E, it says, how does the total cost of a limousine by Lily rental change when the rental time increases by 1 hour, except for the first hour? So how much is it going by each time? You need to put your answer here. For F, what does the first hour of a rental from Limousine by Lily cost? So look at your table. What does the first hour of a rental from Limousine by Lily cost? So what does each rental hour cost from Limousine by Lily after the first hour? Think about the questions we just answered together and put your answer there. And what would it cost to rent a limo from Limousine by Lily for 10 hours? So you need to figure out, we know how much it costs up to 5 hours. We know that it's increasing by $23.75 each time. So if it's increasing by $23.75 each time, how much would it cost per hour? Or sorry, after 10 hours. So thinking we know it's $23.75, 12 hours. And after that $23.75 from the first hour, what was that initial cost? Well, initially, before we even start, it's having that $99 fee. So what would your answer be? And I'm sorry, totally messed that up. I was looking at the wrong problem. And wasn't paying close enough attention. I thought that it said 12. That says 10 hours. Alright, so the first hour is $99.99. So we already have that 1 hour accounted for. And then these are the other 9 hours you would have to figure out, plus hours 2 through 10, which is 9 hours total. So go ahead and put your answer there, and then let's look at question I. Okay, so question I isn't on your paper, but it's just like question H. The only difference is they're asking how much it would cost for 13 hours. So you have to think, how much is it going to cost for that first hour? And then for the additional 12 hours, what equation, what formula, which expression could you use to represent the cost for those other hours? And then you would find the total. Okay. Pause the video if you need to work on part I. When you're done with that, go ahead and hit play, and we'll move on to problem 2. So looking at problem 2, it says, let H represent the total number of rental hours from Limousines by Lily. Write an expression to calculate the number of hours that cost $23.75. So how many of the hours cost $23.75? It's all of the hours except what? Except hour 1. So our equation would be our hours minus hour 1, all are going to equal $23.75. The first hour must be subtracted because it costs $99.99 instead of $23.75. So now using that, they would like us to write an equation. You could solve to find the number of hours a limousine is rented from Limousine by Lily if the total rental cost is $266.24. So again, now we're doing an equation. So we know that our cost is, we have the $99.99 for hour 1 plus our $23.75 for each additional hour. Now, this is what we're trying to find. We're not trying to find the total cost. Now we're trying to find how many hours we're renting for a cost of $266.24. So here's where we would put, we're trying to find out how many hours minus the first hour it takes to charge $266.24. So looking at that problem again, we wrote our equation, and we were looking for the number of hours, so that was our variable that we used. And our hours is going to be h minus 1, and that's because hour 1 is at $99.99. So looking at number 4, it says the equation you wrote in question 3 can be simplified before it can be solved. In previous lessons, you learned to simplify algebraic expressions using a variety of strategies. So 4 says name the strategies necessary to simplify the equation that you wrote. So go ahead, pause the video, and write down the strategies that you would use to simplify this expression. Okay, so the strategies that you would need to use, hopefully they're the same as what you have. It's the distributive property, so that you can rewrite the equation without parentheses, and then combine like terms. So number 5 says, simplify the equation you wrote in question 3. Does it look like the two-step equation you solved in previous lessons? Why or why not? So pause the video and simplify that expression. Remember the expression was our $99.99 plus our $23.75 times our number of hours minus 1, which is equal to $266.24. So go ahead, pause the video when you're ready to check yours. Okay, so looking here, your final equation simplified. We're not solving it yet, we're just simplifying. It should look like this. $76.24 plus 23.75h is equal to 266 and 2400. Okay, so again, we use these two steps up here. I use the distributive property. 7,500 times h gives me 2375 h's, hundreds h's, minus, because I have my minus sign there, 2375 times 1, which is 2375 times 1. I then combined my like terms, so I subtracted 2375 from 99 and 9900ths, and that gave me my 76 and 2400ths. Okay, so looking at the next problem, it tells us to solve your equation from question 5, and what does your solution mean in terms of the problem situation. So remember, we're solving our simplified problem. So our 7624 plus 2375h which is equal to 266 and 2400. So pause the video and work that out, and then check your answer with mine. Okay, so hopefully after working out your problem, you got that the number of hours equaled 8. So the limousine is rented for 8 hours for a charge of $266.24. So now number 7 says to use the table above question 1 to answer each question. So now we're going to be looking at that other column to talk about limousine transportation with class and such. So again, they're asking us to find the difference in price to rent a limousine from transportation with class for 2 hours compared to 1. So go ahead and work through parts A through D, and I will review C and D with you next. So go ahead and pause the video and work through parts A through D on number 7. Okay, so you should have found from working out A and B, when you found the difference between the first and second hour and then between hours 5 and 4 that the difference was consistently $36.55, except for the first hour. So what does it cost to rent for the first hour? Well, hopefully we just looked at the table, and it's $89.99. So let's go ahead and look at problem A. So just like with the other problem, they want us to let H represent the total number of rental hours from transportation with class, and to write an expression to find the number of hours with the cost of $36.55. So again, which of the hours cost $36.55? Well, all of the hours except for hour 1. So again, our expression for the number of hours that costs $36.55 would be the number of hours minus that first hour, because the first hour costs $89.99. Okay, so looking at 8 and 9. So for 8, they want us to let H represent the total number of rental hours from transportation with class, and to write an expression to find the number of hours that cost $35. Okay, sorry. So looking at this, this is just H, or number 8 again, which we've already solved. So now they want us to write and solve an equation to determine the number of hours a limousine is rented from transportation with class if the total cost is $309. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can write down your own equation. When you think you have it, hit play and check yours with mine. Okay, so hopefully this is what your equation looks like. So we have our cost per hour, which is $36.55, and that's for every hour except for hour 1, and that's why we have our expression, H minus 1, and then we have our $89.99 for hour 1, and then our total cost on the other side of our equation, which is $309.29. So now they want you to solve this for the number of hours rented. So go ahead, pause the video, work this out on your with mine. Okay, so hopefully you can check your answer. You can see that the first 2 steps I didn't necessarily solve or simplify both sides. I did simplify. I simplified the one side by using the distributive property, and then combining like terms. So distributive property, and then I combined like terms. After that, I did my 2-step equation. My first step was to subtract 5344 from both sides. So remember, math is fair. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. And then I divided both sides by 3655 to get rid of the 3655 with my H, because that's multiplying. And remember, we're always doing the opposite. Divided one side by 3655, had to divide the other side by 3655. When I did that, I was left with H on the left side and 7 on the right side. So the number of hours the limousine was rented for a total cost of $309.29 was 7 hours. Okay, so now let's look at number 10. So after how many hours would the cost to rent a limousine be the same for each limo rental company? Write an equation, explain your reasoning. So think about this. We know that the cost for each hour for the first company is $23.75. So if we take that off for the first hour as well, $99.99 minus $23.75 would give us $76.24. So you could almost say there's a flat rate of $76.24 plus our $23.75 for every hour, not just hours 2 and above, but for every hour, because we took that off of that initial first hour of $99.99. We could do the same thing for the second company. So the cost for every hour is $36.55 for hours 2 and above, we know. And then we have that initial cost of $89.99. Well, If we subtract that from that first hour, we're left with a base cost of $53.44. And now for every single hour, not just hours 2 and above, the cost is $36.55 for an hour. So going through that, simplified that equation. Remember the steps that you'll have to take. And then pause the video. Go ahead and pause the video and you can check your answer with mine. Okay, so looking at mine, you can see I wrote out my equation and then I started to simplify. So first, I subtracted $53.44 from each side, and I did that obviously just with my like terms. So these cancel on the right side, it canceled each other out, and I was left with just 36 and 55 hours. On the right side, I was still left with my hours. I still had, sorry, my 23.75 hours, but I was also left with $22.80. So then I wanted to just get all my hours on one side. Well, I only have hours on the right side, so let me remove the hours from the left side. So here you can see where I subtracted 23.75 hours. And if I do that to the left side, I also have to do it to the right side. So on the left, I was left with just my $22.80, or just 22.80 Sorry. And on the right, I was left with 12 and 8/10 hours. Then to get rid of that, since this is multiplication, I divided by 12.8 on both sides, and I ended with hours is equal to 1 78/100. So look at number 11. What suggestions would you provide to Katie on the fee she should charge for her limo rental business, and explain your reasoning? So what advice would you give Katie on what she should charge per hour, maybe if there should be a base fee, and what that should be as well? So write your answer to that one and then move on to number 12. Okay, so looking at number 12, you just have practice problems, 6 practice problems. So I'm going to do the first one, part A, with you, and I want you to watch as I solve it just to make sure that you're doing it correctly. And for the problems after that, though, I'd like you to pause the video and then you can just check your answers with mine. So looking at the first one, well, we have parentheses, so we want to simplify the problem by using the distributive property to make it simpler, so we don't have those parentheses. So I'm going to multiply 4 times x, which gives me 4x. I have a minus sign there, so I need to keep that. And then 4 times 7 is 28. I keep my plus 12 is equal to 20. So all I did was simplify that first part. Now that that is simplified, I can go ahead and solve my problem. Well, I have like terms on one side I can combine, so I'm going to go ahead and combine those two. So I have my negative 28 plus 12. So I still have 4x, and it's just going to be minus 16 now, which is equal to 20. Okay, now for both sides, I need to simplify. I already have just numbers on this side and my x's on this side and then on the other. So I want to take this minus 16 and get rid of it. Well, how do I get rid of it? I do the opposite. The opposite of subtraction is addition. So I'm going to add 16 to both sides. When I do that, I'm left with 4x on the left side and 36 on the right side. And my next step is to get rid of this 4. Remember, when a number is next to a variable, it means you're multiplying, so I want to do the opposite. The opposite of multiplication is division, so I'm going to divide both sides by 4. And when I do that, these 4's cancel out, because 4 divided by 4 equals 1, so I have 1x, and 36 divided by 4 gives me 9. So my answer is x equals 9. Go ahead and pause the video and work on B, C, and D, and then hit play and check your answers with mine. Okay, so looking at these problems for B, you can see where I use the distributed property and then combine like terms. Then I could solve my two-step equation. I had to add 50 to both sides because the opposite of subtraction is addition, and then divide both sides by -3. And that's how I got a positive divided by a negative gave me -15, which was equal to x, because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. I did the same thing with C, where I used the distributed property, combined like terms, and then I had to subtract 48 from both sides, and then divide both sides by 5, and that's when I got x is equal to -6. D might have been a little confusing, so again I had to use the distributed property. Half of 5 is 2.5 minus 1/2 x, which is equal to 1/4. So then I subtracted 2.5 from both sides, which left me with just my -1/2 x is equal to -2 and 2/2500. To do the opposite of division, you have to multiply. So the opposite of dividing by 2 is to multiply by 2, and since this was a negative, I multiplied by -2. And in both cases, a negative times a negative is a positive, and that's how I ended with x equals 4 and 5/10. So go ahead and look at E and F as well now, especially after me going over the first 4, and solve those 2 as well. When you're finished, pause the video and check your answers with mine. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at these 2. Again, I used the distributed property for E. Once I did that, I didn't need to combine any like terms, so I just went ahead with my 2 steps. I subtracted 8 from both sides, and then I divided both sides by 6. I'm left with 11/6. I could turn that into a mixed number, but I'm just going to leave it as an improper fraction, and it's in simplest form, as an improper fraction. For F, again, did the same thing, used the distributed property. There weren't any like terms to combine, so I just went ahead and started simplifying the equation. Subtracted 4 and 8/10 from both sides, and then I divided both sides by 2 and 4/10. If I look at this, if I were to remove the decimals, it says 16 over 24ths. That's, in my mind, easier to reduce than saying 1 and 6/10 and 2 and 4/10. So I know I could reduce both of those. 8 goes into both, and I'm left with 2/3, 2/4 and 4/10, divided by 2 and 4/10 would leave me with just 1x. So x equals 2/3. Okay, so looking at problem 2. So as part of her research, Katie discovers that she must charge sales tax to her customers in addition to her rental fees. In her county, the sales tax is 7%. That means that she must charge an additional 7% for her rental fee to be paid as tax. So write a percent equation that would tell Katie how much tax to collect for any amount of rental fee. Let x represent the rental fee. I now want x to represent the rental fee and y to represent the sales tax. So thinking about that, what would sales tax be? Y is our sales tax. My pen will work. And we know 7% as a decimal, if I were going to move my decimal place over 2 places, would be 0.7, not 0.7. So I know y is equal to 0.07 times whatever the total price is, whatever our total rental fee is, which is represented by x. We could also write that as y is equal to 7/100 x. And then you could see these mean the same exact thing because we have 7/100 written here as a decimal and then 7/100 as a fraction. Okay, so Katie also discovers that most limousine rental companies can collect a flat gratuity charge from customers in addition to the rental fee. So Katie decides to collect a gratuity of $35 from her customers. So 2 says, write an equation that represents the total amount of money to be collected for tax and gratuity, T, in terms of the rental fee X. So we have tax and gratuity, which is represented with a T, in terms of the rental fee, which is represented with an X. So looking at that, we know the total cost, or tax plus gratuity, is going to equal our 7 cents times the rental fee, and then it's just a flat rate, so we just add the $35. Okay, so looking at problem A, it asks you to determine, to use the equation we just created, to calculate the amount of tax and gratuity Katie should collect if the rental fee is $220. So we're going to just put in 220 in the place of X. So our equation is going to look like this. Our 7 cents in tax times that $220 plus our flat gratuity rate. So go ahead and solve that problem. Pause the video and check your answer with mine. Alright, so when you multiply out your 7 cents times 220, you should get 15 4/10 plus the $35, which is 50.4. So that means our total is $50.40. So now use your equation again to calculate the amount of tax and gratuity Katie should collect if the fee is $365. Go ahead and work on C and D as well. And then once you finish B, C, and D, go ahead and check your answers with mine. So go ahead and check your answer for B. I got the total for tax and gratuity would be $60.55. Okay, so then looking at C and D, you have to pay very close attention because the question is asking you to find a different variable. So it says use your equation to calculate the fee if the amount collected is $65.66. So our fee would go on the left, and we're looking for our cost here. Then we just solve our equation, subtract 35 from both sides, and then divide both sides by 7 cents or 700. And we would get X is equal to 438. On the next question, we're doing the same thing again, where we're replacing the total cost and not the rental fee. We're looking for a rental fee. So we're going to subtract 35 from both sides, and then again divide both sides by 700, and X should equal 162. Okay, and so our final problem is a little complicated, so we need to be careful and make sure that we're using all parts. So after completing her research, Katie decides to charge $75 for the first hour and $35 for each additional hour. She continues to collect the 7% sales tax and $35 gratuity from each customer in addition to the rental fee. But the amount of tax and gratuity that Katie collected from a customer was $62.09. How many hours did the customer rent a limousine? So look, what are they asking us to find? They're asking us to find how many hours. So the first thing we need to do is we need to use the formulas that we know. We know that she was charged $62.09 for tax and gratuity. Where our equation for tax and gratuity was that y equals 0.07 or 700 x plus 35. But we wouldn't know hours, and hours isn't included in that. But we do have another equation. We know that she charges the final price is equal to, and I'll just use an F for that, our final price is equal to her $75 fee plus 35 or for the first hour, and then $39 for each additional hour. So every hour except for hour 1. So we're going to have to use these two equations to find the total amount. So first, use the first equation, and I guess we could make this y as well. That makes more sense. or actually we would use it as X, is going to be the total amount that she pays, which is what we'll use up here. So find X for the first problem, and then we can put X in our second equation to find the number of hours. So go ahead and do that, pause the video, and then check your answers with mine. Okay, so looking at our problem then, I substituted in Y our cost for gratuity and tax was 62 and 9/10, and then I solved our equation. I subtracted 35 from both sides, and then I divided both sides by 700. And so the total cost was, or of the trip without fees and gratuity, was $387. I then plugged that into our other equation to look for the number of hours. So before I could start solving the equation, I had to simplify by using the distributive property. Then I simplified that by combining the 75 and 39. That gave me 387 is equal to 36 and 39 H's. Then I started to simplify. So I subtracted 30, or to solve the equation, I subtracted 36 from both sides and then by 39, and that gave me my answer of the hours is equal to 9, or 9 equals the number of hours. So they rented for 9 hours. David.